Hey, how's it going out there? My name is Eric, and today we're going to talk about Deno and Deno Fresh and Deno Deploy. Let's dive in. So we have Next.js, we have Create React App, we have Svelte, we have other things like this, but they all run on Node. And I think one thing that we all kind of strive for as developers is better performance. And with Deno, and from what I understand, it is Deno. It isn't Deno. But feel free to argue that. But with Deno and Deno Fresh, you can build incredible things. Now, maybe they're not ready for prime time production yet, but for your developer projects, this will be great and it will speed things up. And if you're familiar with TypeScript and React already, then this isn't a big deal for you at all. So let's basically just go through what is Deno. Deno is a simple, modern, and secure runtime for JavaScript, TypeScript, and WebAssembly that uses V8 and is built in Rust. It provides web platform functionality and adopts web platform standards. It's secure by default. There's no file, network, or environment access unless explicitly enabled. It supports TypeScript out of the box. It ships only as an executable file. It ships only a single executable file and has a built-in development tooling like a dependency inspector called Deno Info or a code formatter called Deno Format. It has a set of reviewed standard modules that are guaranteed to work in Deno. I think this is very important for the future of us to kind of, as a developer community, to kind of understand that we should always be focused on delivering performance, and we should always, we shouldn't be slowed down by our frameworks. And as an example, let me just give you one of my Next.js apps. Now, this is a really big app, so big that I couldn't even statically render all the pages because I broke Vercel's static limitation. And one of the things is I have these color pages, which have a hex color, and you can go to colorfuldots.com/color/a hex color. And this is like a resource I built for designers, developers to get the right colors. One thing I struggled with as a front-end developer was finding, this is before token-based CSS platforms like Style Components or Style Systems or Theme UI or Tailwind or sort of these things. And this wasn't, I didn't build this before that. In the past in my career, I've realized that a lot of times when you build web apps with a team, you'll end up with like 16 different grays and 3 different shades of a color. So the tokenized approach really helps. Now, one of the things that I ran into with building this page building this site was really just that. I was finding myself having colors all over the place, and what I needed was like a standard library. So one of the things to do is like, what color should I have for, what is the split complement color of this purple honey creeper color, this 815AF3 hex, what is that? And that would be the split would be like this green or this pink. And if I click on the green, then I see, okay, there it is. What I really want to show you about this site is that I built it in Next, and it's mostly static for the most part. Like all of these pages here, I believe, are static. The colors page, though, because there's so many colors, I couldn't do that. Vercel said, no, you don't. You can't do that. 16.7 million colors as static HTML files will take forever to upload anyways. So it needed to be server-side rendered. And so, yeah. So one thing that happens in a Next.js app is that the bigger the app, the slower things become. So my deployments are like 4 to 6 minutes right now, which is a big improvement. And most of that is because I use Preact instead of React. And then I'm also using Firebase or Firestore pretty much for the entire database and authentication and images and some other things. So I did it that way. I was really using Firestore, Firebase for a lot of projects, and I was like, this is so stupidly simple, and it made a lot of sense. So I used it, and this is a few years ago that I built this. But one thing I've realized is I can't get the bundle size any smaller. I've done everything. It's a progressive web app. It's optimized as much as possible, and I can't get it any smaller. So I'm basically rebuilding this app, this entire site. So I'm evaluating these languages because I cannot run into that again, where if the app grows in pages, in size, or whatever, I don't want my developer experience to be slowed down. I don't want deployments to be slowed down. I want things to be incredibly fast at every stage. So with that said, Deno is probably one of those answers once it's production ready that could really solve this problem. It doesn't slow things down as the app gets bigger. So that's really awesome. So I just wanted to leave you with that to kind of think about when you architect your web apps, that sure, the weekend projects are rapid and they're fast and they're so quick, but scale it, get it bigger, add hundreds of thousands of pages to it, see what happens. And I love Next. Like, I would still pick Next over everything because usually websites aren't this big. So anyway, so let's get out of here and let's play around with Fresh. To install Deno, you're going to have to install the CLI, which is curl -fssl https deno.land install.sh. Anyways, let's just pop that in our terminal over here. We'll go ahead and run that. Shouldn't take too long. There it is. It's all done. Now, one of the things, I should be able to run Deno right now, which I can. And to get out of that, I can do Control D. But one of the things that you may experience is Deno may not be installed in your ZSH or your bash RC file. So what you'll have to do is just do code. You'll have to do we'll do this, tilde. Here we go, ... and then ZSH, probably in the RC file. At the bottom of it, you're going to have to add the export path or the install paths. So your terminal can pick that up and use the command. So you'll replace my name here with your computer name, whatever your computer is called. Then you'll save that file and you run, afterwards you'll run source and then the file itself, hit enter, and then you should be able to, without a problem, use the CLI. So we'll close that out with Control D again. Now I've already gone ahead and built an app, but we're going to scaffold one out just using this command here. I've already built one, and we're going to use that one as reference because I'm not going to rebuild what I've already built behind the scenes. I'm just going to walk you through on how to do it. So we'll CD back into a different directory. We'll create, we'll paste this line, but instead of saying my project, we'll say Deno app 1. It's going to go ahead and pull all the dependencies in that it needs to build Fresh. It's also going to stop us and say, do you want to use Twind, which is not Tailwind from what you know through npm install Tailwind. Instead, it's their own version because it is basically a smaller ecosystem and not necessarily using its using all npm packages or whatever there. So it sounds like they rewrote this Twind package specifically for the Tailwind in JS solution. So we'll say yes to that because we do want Tailwind. And are we using VS Code? Yes, I am. If you're not, I don't know what happens. I'd like to know, but I'm not going to go start a new IDE or use a different IDE to find out. So I'm just going to hit yes. Okay, created the project. You'll notice that it says CD my project, but clearly our project name was Deno app 1. So maybe they just forgot the variable here. But in the shell script, but let's just get in there. So we'll CD into that directory. Whoop, CD into Deno app 1, and we'll go through what it gives us. So we'll put that over here. So right off the bat, we can see we got VS Code extensions.js, which I'm assuming gives you some syntax highlighting and other things that work with VS Code. And it looks like it's enabled. Okay. Then we have this folder called Islands, which we'll get into in a little bit. It's part of this island architecture, which is basically just partial rendering. So all of the components are sent to the server as static HTML. However, if the component is in the islands directory, it sends it with JavaScript. So that's a big distinction right there, where if you don't use JavaScript in your component, let's just say it's a section component with just a div that basically wraps around everything. Maybe it has a different color or something, a different class or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily use any kind of on-click or some sort of function that is calling. Then if it's outside of islands, it'll just render as a static HTML component, which is super fast, and it works in every device and every browser, pretty much no matter what. But when it's in islands, it does send the dynamic interactivity and JavaScript code that's associated with it. So that's a big distinction. Now, if some of you are familiar with Next.js, you have routes or pages which have the file-based routing system, and Deno Fresh does the same thing. So in a way, from what I understand, so we have API, which has a joke file in it, which looks like it takes jokes, which are a string of jokes, or an array of strings of jokes, and it renders them out under a randomized thing, and it shows one joke, and it renders it out as a response. Then you have dynamic routes, which if you're familiar with Next.js, we're doing the same thing here. So you have square brackets, the parameter name, which in this case is name.tsx, and you can get that prop, the params, and the name. So that right off the bat, I love this. This looks just like Next.js, feels just like Next, and if you're familiar, it just makes it so much easier. Then we have just a static HTML static index page here. Well, actually not static fully. It has the dynamic island counter to it, which starts on 3, which let's make it start on 300. Yeah, we'll say 300, just because I want to be a little different. And so when we do go to render this, we're going to actually see it'll start on 300 is all that we're doing. And then you have your static assets, similar to Next.js. You put any assets in here and it should render statically. You call it with / and it just knows it bypasses static because the root of your domain or whatever is going to remove static, and it just is static. It's going to be put in there. Now, if I want to put these in images, like image, and then bring those images in, that works just fine too. You would just reference this and update that image. That works just fine. Not going to do that. We'll leave that 300. But I do want to point that out because I think that's interesting to know, is that it's all the same so far in Next in a way. And also you can use Preact, which we're using here in Next.js. It's exactly what I was doing for colorful dots, and you should definitely do it if you can. It may not work for everyone's architecture, but it worked for mine, and it significantly improved the bundle size and overall performance. I didn't really run into any issues when I did the conversion, so it was great. And then we have a utils folder, which looks like it's just for, looks like it needs for Tailwind or Twind in this case. Sure, it's setting up its configuration, so you could add JIT here. I forget what it is. Is it mode JIT? I'm not sure what it is. I forget what it is. But you could do different things. I guess you could probably override the Tailwind config here. I think that's what it is because it looks like it doesn't have a Tailwind config, so I guess you would probably do it here. And then you have a deno.json file, which is ultimately your scripts folder. Like in a package.json file, you'd have scripts as a key, and then you'd have the scripts to run. So you could have, like, you know, another one that maybe is called build or deploy or clean or lint or something like that. All of that would go in here. And then you have an import. What does this import do? If we go into that import, you'll notice that it is like the NPM packages. It is our packages. But there is no package.json. So that's another interesting distinction. Now this file here is generated, the fresh.gen.ts file, which is basically the manifest of your routes in Deno Fresh. And when I add a new route, which I'm going to do in a minute here. Actually, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to show you my other project that I already built. It'd be much easier for us to digest this. So just note that when you add a new route and you start the server, you run a task. When we go back and run this task, this start command, it will generate the fresh.gen file and it will add a new route. I don't know how it sorts it. I'd be interested to kind of add a bunch of routes and see how it sorts this. And then we'll add a new island if you add those as well. So it's going to keep a list of this. Now, one thing I love about this already is the fact that in Next.js, you don't see this. You see it during build time. This happens, I believe, during runtime because there is no build step. So when I start, Deno task start, and let's just do it. I didn't want to, but I will. I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to call this one name2. So we're just going to copy it and we'll just call it name2. And we will go and change that variable inside of here, name2, right? And is that all we have to do? I think that's all we have to do. So then we'll say goodbye here instead of hello, just so we can have some distinction. We'll say goodbye. And we'll call this, we'll call it name. Name2 is fine. We'll say goodbye, name2. Now, when we start this, we'll go back here. We don't have name2 in here, but let's start it. And now we do. So I didn't build. I just ran. I ran start. So before it only had 3 routes and 1 island. Now it has 4 routes and 1 island. Very cool stuff. And it generated here. Now you commit this file in your GitHub, in your Git, and your team can understand, Eric just added name2 in the routes. There must be more to it. So let's, it's just helps kind of bring everything together in a nice ecosystem. I love that. Great concepts. Very lightweight so far. That was very digestible. Okay, and then there's finally the main.ts file, which I feel like in Next.js, this would be your app.js, your _app.js file. So I haven't gone through this file at all. So this is the first time I'm really seeing it, but I'm imagining that's what it is. It kicks out a manifest. It renders the context and the tailwind, probably all compiled or all purged. CSS adds the style sheet. I don't know what this really does. It looks like it does a reset, maybe on the style sheet, and packages it all up. Okay, that's as far as I know. Okay, that's that. That's basically the start. We got it running, and let's go take a look at that real quick. So here's what we get. We started on 300, as we said. Welcome to Fresh. Try updating this message and routes, blah, 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 and refresh. Okay, let's refresh. It should have its default state, which is 300. It's incredibly fast. I'm reloading, and let's just do real quick, just because I'm curious. Let's do a Lighthouse test. And remember, this is dev. This isn't build. I didn't build anything. So I guess in this case, it would be the same. And I haven't done a Lighthouse yet scoring this, but let's just see what it does. Also, I'm not doing the Lighthouse test in a private browser. So I have other extensions that will slow it down. That's a known thing. But regardless of how long this takes, it's still warming up. We should see a pretty good score, I imagine. And while we wait for that, let's also go over to localhost 8000 and go over to what I call it, name2. Okay, it says goodbye. I realize now I've made a big mistake because I can't even get to hello. Because I made both of these the same, which there's no way to distinguish that without putting it into a new folder. So we'll say name, or we'll say hello as a folder. We'll put name inside of that. And same thing over here, we'll do goodbye. And then inside of goodbye, we'll put name2. Refresh, and we got to go over to hello and something. Hello, Eric. Okay, that works. Let's go to goodbye, Eric. And that works. Okay, cool. And whatever I type here is the variable. So that's just like Next.js, incredibly fast though. Like there's no assets or whatever, but okay. So there you go. We got 100% on the big number that we really need on performance. And look at these numbers. Okay, yes, there's no like huge style sheets and huge components going on, but just look at that. That is sick. That is sick. Just look at this performance. That is insane. Okay, that's insane. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with probably Preact and just it's super lightweight in general, but that's cool. But again, I'd have to build my Next.js app, open it in a private window, remove all my extensions, and try to do things, whatever I can do to basically get the performance up. I mean, I've spent hours just tweaking the performance side of things with Google, like trying to satisfy Google. And sometimes it just doesn't work. So, okay, so we got that. What else can we do in here? One thing I wanted to do was, and I'll share this document I wrote just to help you. There's more resources on the internet about it, but let's just do it. Let's just share it. Sharing is caring. The other thing we'll do then is we'll open up my other project that I have. Okay, so we'll copy over these two files that I already have. One is going to be called a list item component. And we'll copy that from the project I did earlier in Deno to get everything working. And then we'll bring it over to the project that we just started together. We'll create a new file. Actually, I don't need to do that. I can just drag the list item over here by holding Option and drag. And that'll duplicate it and put it in the project. So we have a list item component, which has Preact and Twind, and it has an interface for the list item props. And it's an export default function of list item, which has props, list item props. And it basically just returns the title with a link. The other file we're going to need is this post file. Actually, we're going to have three files. So we'll have post. And so we'll put that in routes in our project. So we'll bring over post, and that contains an ID, a dynamic route rather, with the parameter of ID, which has post props, the ID, the title, the body, the user ID. And then it has a export const handler, which fetches the data from our API endpoint and listens for that dynamic ID of ID. And then it checks if it exists. If it does not, rather, then returns nothing. And you could have an error there, throw an error, or whatever you want to do. Or if it does, it creates the JSON and it kicks it out and it renders it to the data. And then if there's no data, then show a not found, post not found. Otherwise, render it and show the body and the title and everything else. So we'll grab this file, this whole folder. We'll hold down Option and drag it over to our other project, put it in routes. And there we go. And then the last file we're going to need is this posts file, plural, and has the same typings, except it's posts. And it's going to have an ID, title, body, user ID. And we use another handler function to grab all those posts, asynchronously fetch all of the posts. Notice we're omitting the ID that we had before. And really the same concept, check if it's available. If not, do nothing. Otherwise, return the post array into the page, and we export default function page, and we kick out the data, and we check again. If there's nothing found, there's no posts. And if there is, we map through the data, and we add a date, all of the data to each one of these list items, which is the component we dragged in earlier into this. So with that, let's bring over our posts. And from here, if we go and render, so we'll bring that into routes. If we go in and render this page now, we'll start up the server. Deno task start and we click on 880. Okay, there's our counter from before with 300. And I don't know if I even showed you the increment or the decrement, but you know, common counter up and down. It's pretty awesome. But what we want to go to is posts, and we should see a list of all the posts. There we go. And where does this come from? Again, this comes from JSON placeholder. So if we go back to posts, then we're fetching all this data on posts, and there you go. And then I've also added a link to this. If we click on one, it goes to the detail page, just like you would expect. If I were to change this to, let's say, something else other than a number, then we're going to get page not found. We could also kick out another error, or we could just select like 100, and there we go. Or we could select 33 or 22, and there you go. So that's pretty much it. It's straightforward. It's very similar to Next.js, and if you're familiar with those patterns, it's pretty awesome. Is it ready for prime time production? No. Is it ready for developer side projects? Absolutely. I think the only other thing we should do now that we have this all running is figure out Deno deploy. Deno deploy is a distributed system that runs JavaScript, TypeScript, and WebAssembly at the edge worldwide. The service deeply integrates the V8 engine, JavaScript runtime, and with a high-performance asynchronous web server to provide optimal performance without unnecessary intermediate abstractions. So the pricing for what we're going to do is absolutely free. You can check this out. I'll leave this link in here. I'm not a sponsor. This is not a sponsored post. I just think this is cool. I guess I'm a sponsor of thinking it's cool. One thing I wanted to do is deploy it. Deno app 1. There it is. Okay. If I click install now, all right, and I do my password stuff, put it there. Hold on a second. You don't need my passwords. I need my passwords. Okay. Confirm password. And it looks like it brought me right back here. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to choose Deno app. Select the branch. I'm going to just click main. I'm going to click automatic. And I think for this, what's my root? Boy, I don't even know. I guess it's main. Sounds good to me. And do I need an environment variable? I do not. Okay, and it should be done. It is done, and there it is. It's deployed already. It's already deployed. And if I view it, there you go. If I go to posts, there you go. If I click here, boom. So there you go, folks. How incredible is this? And free? Like, let's open up Lighthouse again and analyze this page. In production, let's see what we get. We had 100% before in the Lighthouse score for performance. We had some glitches with some lower than average scores. Yeah, look at that. So really nothing changed. Everything, best practices came because probably HTTPS is the one thing. But so that is that. I think that's incredible. I'm going to add this part, not that. I'm going to add, where is that file? This file right here. I'm going to add, instead of this URL, we're going to add, where is it here? I thought I had, oh yeah, this one. I'll change this to our project right there so you can check that out. And I'll put this in the repo and you'll be able to check this out. There's documentation here for the docs if you get stuck. And for this one, we're just going to say post, and then we'll say like 1. That's it. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Have a good one. Bye. Oh, you swim like the school has left you.